Mark Stippen.
Mr. Toastmaster, members, and guests. Who likes giving hugs? Let me see a show of hands. Fantastic. Well, me, there was a time where I did not like hugging at all. But here, one of the things that I learned is that hugs have a lot of power to it. If you think about it in our country, hugging is a way that we welcome one another. We just came off of Thanksgiving, and we saw our family and friends. What did we probably do a lot during that period? And that's hugging. Embracing people, letting them know that you're important, letting you know that I'm happy to see you. Hugs. Hugging also, especially for kids, is a great way of helping to develop self-esteem. Kids want to feel safe and protected. And there's something about the warmth of arms going around them and just squeezing them tight makes them feel safe. Hugging also helps us when we're going through tough times in our lives, right? I think when we lose people in our family and friends, that's a time where people will go and they will hug, and then many times someone will give you a hug and it seems like they're holding on to you for dear life. It's something about having that person, feeling the warmth of that individual, helps them to get through those tough times. Hugs also might be different if you think about it for gender. Typically women probably feel a little bit more comfortable than men when it comes to hugging. You think about people in your lives that come and are always hugging, a lot of times it'll tend to be women. Men, let's face it, we aren't always big huggers. But probably over the last couple of decades, you will see men doing a little bit more hugging than what they used to, or what I might call bro hugs. And you probably know what I mean. Let me give you a good example of a bro hug. So the two men are coming up to one another. Hey, John. You give him a handshake, and you throw the other arm around him. That's acceptable. Bro hugs. What I hope to inspire you, that if you are not a hugger, that you will become a hugger. That today, when you leave from out of this room, if you have not hugged someone today, you most certainly will. Probably the most impactful experience that I have had with hugs came about 3 months ago. I was at a networking group. There were probably about 20 of us in this room. And one by one, we went through and we introduced ourselves. Well, there was a guy that was sitting by the name of Terrence Talley, had a mohawk in his head. And I have to admit, I'm sitting there thinking, who is this guy? Sitting there with a mohawk. Well, Terrence stood up to introduce himself. He said, I'm Terrence Talley, and I have a nonprofit where I go out and I inspire middle school and deal with all the challenges that young people deal with. And one of the things that I do are called dad hugs. I thought, dad hug. Okay, this is gonna be corny. I can tell already. I'm just being honest, and that's what I was thinking. So he started to tell this story that he was at this high school in Michigan. And he gives his speech or his talk to an auditorium filled with teenagers. And he said, as he does at every presentation, he says, if you would like to have a dad hug, just come on down, stand in a line, and I'll give you a dad hug. He said that that line just whipped around that auditorium of kids that wanted a dad hug. So as he's standing there and he's hugging the kids as they're coming up, he says he looks to the right of his corner of his eye, and he sees this kid dressed all in black, the black nails, just pacing back and forth, just pacing back and forth. And he says, I think to myself, this is weird, but okay, whatever. And he continues to hug the kids as they come through the line. Whereas the last person comes through, this young man with all the black just shot over in front of him and looked him right in the face and said, you made me feel something. And then without any kind of warning, he hugged him as tight as he possibly could. And then Terrence said, he whispered in his ear, you're the reason why I'm here. The young man let go, and then he ran out of the auditorium. Once again, Terrence said to himself, that's a little different. So he started to pack up, and about 20 minutes later, the principal came into the auditorium and said, let me tell you about that young man that just ran out of the auditorium. He went back to his class. This was a kid that no one in the class would ever speak to. He said the students were in there, and they were talking about the presentation, talking about Terrence and the hugs, and they asked him, did you receive a hug from Terrence? And his response to them was, that was the first time I have ever received a hug. Let's think about that. So one by one, all of these students who would never talk to this young man walked up to him and gave him a hug. One by one by one. I'm 52 years old. I was fighting back a tear that day when he told that part. He did the same thing again. He shot out of the room. This time he ran to the principal's office. And he walked into the principal's office and he reached into his backpack. And he pulled out a gun. He walked to the desk, looked the principal in the eye, set the gun down on the desk. And he told the principal, today, I was going to kill myself. If you have any questions of whether or not there is power in a hug, those hugs that day, the hug that started with Terrence, that then went to each of those young students, saved that young man's life that day. So, if you're like me, and hugs aren't always easy for you to do, just think about how the hug that you give today may change someone's day or save someone's life.